and I'm also a student at Michigan State University pursuing my degree in zoology. And it is World Snake Week here, and it is the second day, so a lot of different zoological organizations are organizing programs to educate people about snakes and celebrate them. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys all about snake reproduction. And this here is my special guest, Rojo, here to help me out with the presentation. I'll give him a little introduction and then launch into the material I prepared. So Rojo is a common boa, also known as a red-tailed boa. They're called that because their tail is often a little bit more red than the rest of their body. Their scientific name is boa constrictor constrictor. So that's pretty self-explanatory. They are constrictors, and in the boa family. They are found in Central and South America, including some Caribbean islands. And they have a diet of small animals and birds. They can grow from 6 to 10 feet, with the females always being larger than the males. And they will live about 20 to 30 years in the wild, and that can extend to about 40 years when in human care. They are constrictors, so when they are attacking their food, they will strike at it and then rapidly coil their bodies around it to prevent blood flow and cause a quick death for their prey. And then they will swallow that whole, moving it back into their throat with their many teeth that they can move independently for some of them. And this motion is called a pterygoid walk. So for snake reproduction, we're going to be starting off with some basic snake anatomy. So with all of us, we have chromosomes. Those are structures that contain our DNA. It codes our body, how it looks, how it functions. And we have two very special chromosomes that determine whether we are male or female. And in humans, those are XY for males and XX for females. But in snakes and birds, it's a little bit different. They use different letters and have different patterns. So for the females, they will have ZW chromosomes. And Robo is stealing my speaker. Thank you, cat. And then the males will have ZZ chromosomes.
That snake.
So you might notice that those patterns are sort of switched around, where the females will have two different types of chromosomes, and the males will have two of the same chromosomes. And another interesting thing about those chromosomes are that they are about the same size and have similar functionalities, whereas with humans, the Y chromosome is much smaller, and so that can cause some complications with recessive genes, like males being more susceptible to being colorblind. Snakes don't have to deal with those problems, so that is pretty cool. Another part of their physical anatomy that they have is called the cloaca. I'll walk around and show you Rojo's. It is right there. And this is sort of like a foyer that leads to 3 different paths in their bodies. And so one path will lead to where they get rid of liquid waste from their bloodstream and lymph, and that is processed and removed from their body in urate. Another path leads to the solid waste, where they poop out anything they don't want in their body. And the third path leads to their reproductive tract. So in females, that will lead to 2 paired oviducts, where they will develop their eggs, and then those will exit through their cloaca. And then in males, that leads to a similar structure. They will have 2 paired testes along with 2 paired hemipenes. And if you could bring over those 2 little bottles, I actually have a couple of specimens to show you. And so each testis is linked to an individual hemipene, and those are the structures that will produce the genetic material for the males, and their mode of transferring that genetic material so that they can make babies. So these are a couple hemipenes from 2 different types of snakes. You guys can hold these and pass them around. As you can see, they look pretty different from one another. And so different species of snakes structures that serve their own purposes. None of them are quite the same. And these ones we have because the snakes that used to own them had some medical complications and they got stuck outside their body. Normally, the hemipenes are stored behind the cloaca in this portion of their tail, and they are stored inside out. So when they are mating, they pop them out and they'll be right side out again, but sometimes they get stuck outside the body and they can't put them back in. And so if that goes on too long, they dry out and they fall off. And so that's why we have those specimens. Another part of snake reproductive anatomy that you can also see on Rojo are the pelvic spurs. They're these little hooks right here. And those are because very long ago, snakes evolved from creatures that had legs. And so these are the remnants of those legs. They are made of leftover femur bone and covered with a modified scale. And so snakes kept this structure because it is useful for them during the mating process. Males will have more pronounced spurs, and they will be able to use those spurs to grip on to females while they are in the mating process. So that is some interesting parts of their anatomy. Moving on to different methods of reproduction, I won't get into the nitty-gritty details of copulation, but they do have a few different methods of making babies. That first method is going to be the most common. It is called oviparity. So oviparous snakes are egg layers. If you look at that word, you can break it down into two different parts. A lot of science words come from Latin roots. So the first part of that word, ovi, means egg, and parity, or paris, comes from the word that means to bring forth or to give birth to. So egg birth. It explains itself. They are egg layers. So they will have eggs that start developing inside their bodies, and once they are fully formed, they will exit through the cloaca. These eggs are a little bit different than bird eggs that you might be used to. They are often a little bit larger, but the main difference is their texture. They will be a lot softer and have a leathery feel. They are also semi-permeable, so water can enter the egg, and also oxygen can enter the egg. They can have from one baby all the way to 100 babies at a time, and lay those as eggs. They have so many because little snakes are very vulnerable to predation, so a lot of things want to eat those little snakes. So they have a lot of babies, so they can make sure that some of them survive to adulthood. And when the babies are inside their egg, they are nourished through the yolk of the egg that contains all of their nutritional value that they need to grow up and function outside of their egg. And then for the next method of reproduction, viviparity, that is sort of at the absolute opposite end of the spectrum. And if we take a look at the parts of the word, vivi means live, and then parity means birth again. So that is live birth. That is what mammals do, and surprisingly, snakes also have this ability. So when snakes are viviparous, they have babies grow inside the mother's oviducts, and they will be nourished with a placental connection. So the mother will be eating food, and that food is going to provide the babies inside nutrients, just like with mammals, and it also facilitates the gas exchange that they need to breathe and keep their tissues healthy. They can have even more snakes, or even more babies, than the egg-laying snakes. They can have up to 150 babies at once, which is a lot of babies to contain inside a single snake. But a lot of these species that do have the ability to give live birth are very large, and Rojo is one of them. See, most of the members of the boa family are viviparous. And they adapted to be this way because of their large size. It's a lot easier for them to guard their own bodies with examples of snakes that are viviparous are the water snakes and the sea snakes. Since they are mostly in the water and those eggs are semi-permeable, the water could flood the eggs and drown out the babies if they were egg layers. So they will also have live birth to keep those babies safe and warm inside. Another snake that gives live birth are the white-lipped snakes, and that is because they live in a very cold climate. So it is a lot easier for the mother snakes to keep their own body warm than to heat up and then bring their heat back to their eggs to heat them up. It's just a lot more efficient to keep all their babies with them. And then the final method of reproduction is ovoviviparity. So we have both of those words, both egg and live, and it's sort of an evolutionary halfway point between egg layers and live birth. They will form eggs inside the mother's body, and instead of laying them, they will incubate them until they are ready to hatch. So those eggs will hatch inside the mother's body, and then they will give what looks like live birth. So after those babies hatch out of their eggs, whatever's left over from the egg, including the shell and any other goo that might remain, is absorbed back into the mother's body to provide her additional nutrients. While those babies are growing inside the eggs, they are still nourished by the yolk and have very minimal input from the mother snake, other than providing that warmth that the live bearers will have. And the most notable example of ovoviviparous snakes are vipers, in particular rattlesnakes. Since they do have that fearsome reputation and strong venom, they are able to protect their own bodies very well, rather than having to manage a clutch of eggs to protect as well. And so keeping those eggs inside them is better suited to have the most number of babies survive. So about 70% of snakes are going to be the egg layers, and the remaining 30% will fall into those last two categories of being live bearers or look like they give live birth. And initially, all snakes were egg layers, and as they evolved and developed more defense mechanisms, they transitioned to those newer methods of reproduction that would help them more and improve the survival rates of their babies. Now this fourth thing I have up here is parthenogenesis. It's not entirely its own category of reproduction. It does overlap with oviparity, but it is when a snake is able to reproduce without a mate. So there are two different types of parthenogenesis: obligate parthenogenesis and facultative parthenogenesis. So for facultative parthenogenesis, that means that the snake has the ability to reproduce with a mate, but also can reproduce by itself. So this mostly happens when snakes are kept in human care, when they are kept alone without a mate, and they're like, I gotta spread my genes, I don't have any kids, and I would really like some. So they have the ability to reproduce all by themselves, and this doesn't happen very often in the wild because they do have access to mates. And the other form of parthenogenesis is obligate parthenogenesis, and those are snakes that can only reproduce through parthenogenesis. So there is only one species of snake, which is pictured on my little manual slideshow. It is the Brahminy blind snake, and right next to it, for reference, is the size of a penny. So they are very, very tiny snakes. They are also known by a slightly cuter name. They are known as the flower pot snake. And they are blind snakes. They look a lot like worms, and they are an entirely female species. Unlike most snakes, which have those two sex-determining chromosomes, these guys will have 3. And so that aids in the way that they can reproduce. With facultative parthenogenesis, sometimes it's hard to tell if a snake is actually performing parthenogenesis because many snakes have the ability to store genetic material for up to 5 years after a mating event. So sometimes there is a very strange occurrence where a male snake will father children after he is dead, because that genetic material has been already transferred to the female, and she can choose when she wants to use it to have babies. Oftentimes, snakes will choose not to have babies right away if they are not in ideal conditions, if they don't if they have not been eating enough food and there is not enough food available to them, or if the environment they are is just very risky and there is a lot of predators around, they will choose to wait to have babies, and luckily their bodies allow them to do that. Okay, so here is being a little squirmy today. And the next aspect of reproduction I want to discuss is parental care. Often you'll think about mammals, and they will often take care of their young in nearly all cases. But when you think of reptiles, you kind of think about them laying eggs and then leaving. But there are a few cases where there are very care. One of the most notable examples are rattlesnakes. We have a poster up on our deck that says rattlesnakes are very good mothers because they stay with their young until their first shed. So they are an ovoviviparous species, so they keep their eggs inside them until they're ready to hatch. Make sure that they are staying healthy and eating. But after those little snakes are born, they will still stay with them and make sure that they are able to figure out the world on their own, figure out how to hunt. As I said, the little snakes are very vulnerable to predators. And so, especially with rattlesnakes, when they are born, they only have one segment of their rattle, so they can't make that warning noise that will alert predators to stay away. And so their mom will watch over them and make sure that they learn how the world works, how to eat, and how to provide for themselves. And after their first shed, they will go disperse and have a better chance of surviving, since before their first shed, they are the most vulnerable to predation. Another example are pythons. Pythons are an egg-laying species, and unlike most snakes, they will stay with their clutch all the way up until their first shed, like rattlesnakes. So that is a very energy-draining process for the mother, as the eggs can take multiple months to hatch, and she will often not leave that clutch for very long periods of time. So there's a chance that she will not have eaten for up to like 6 months and still stay with her babies after they're born. They also have the ability to actually change the color of their scales to become a little bit darker than normal, so they can absorb more warmth from the sun. And so the mothers will leave for very short periods of time, go heat up in the sun, and then bring that warmth back to their eggs and transfer it to them, since they are ectothermic and cannot regulate their own heat, especially when they are still in eggs. They need their environment to be warm so they can develop well. And they are also very smart. They will not do this process unless it is in a cooler environment. So if it is below 82 degrees, they will go heat up their eggs, but they can sense when it is too hot, and they will not do this process, because if their eggs are too hot, they can also create complications. And king cobras, another species with a pretty fearsome reputation, are also really good parents. They will build elaborate nests that can be 4 feet wide and 4 feet high out of different sticks and leaves, especially bamboo. And both parents will guard their nests. Their nests will often be 2 separate layers, with the bottom layer being an incubation chamber for their eggs, and their top layer for the parents to warm them up and guard their eggs. And the parents will take turns trading off, guarding the nest and heating up the eggs. And it has been shown that male king cobras are more aggressive than normal when they are guarding their nests, so that becomes one of their top priorities. And the last thing I want to talk about with you today is courtship rituals. Snakes are often very romantic and sometimes not so much. Going back to king cobras, they are one of the notable examples of ritual combat in nature. If there are two males in one area and they would like to mate with a female, they will fight each other to have that right. Instead of going and trying to bite each other, they will have a sort of wrestling match where they will try to pin the other one's head down. And so they will twist and turn and try to pin each other down. And often it is the smaller snake that loses that fight. And they will slither off in defeat and let the winner of the fight mate with the female if she is willing. Another courtship ritual is mating balls. So this especially happens in garter snakes and green anacondas. So when snakes are in cooler regions, they will go into a state of dormancy, and right after they emerge from that dormancy, they will have their mating season. So the males will emerge first from dormancy, and they will pick up chemical trails that the females are leaving, saying that they are ready to mate, and those are called pheromone trails. And so all of these male snakes will gather and see this one trail of the female, and they will swarm over to that location for the chance to spread their genes. And they will form giant balls of snakes surrounding that one female. And the female actually does enjoy this process because she can be selective of who gets to be the father to her children. So she can decide which snake has the best genes that she would like to pass down to her offspring. And rattlesnakes are very, very romantic. They will engage in very long courtship rituals that include the male rubbing his chin on the female until she decides that he is worthy enough to mate with her. Yeah. And sometimes the female gets fed up with him. She will flick her tail at him, and he will have to wait for a period for her to, again, agree to engage in the courtship. And this can take over a week, and usually, with persistence, they are successful in mating. So there are a ton of different strategies that snakes use, from their physical structures that they have to their behaviors and the different, due to the different environments that they inhabit and the different genes that they have. There is a very diverse range of reproductive methods within snakes, and we are still learning more from them every day. They are very fantastic creatures and have a lot of knowledge to share with us. So that is all I have for you guys today. I'll give the live stream one last close-up with Rojo, and then I can take any questions you guys might have.
I guess as far as you said they would strike their prey and then